John. Mark. These are good pictures, Isha.
That's because I'm excellent.
All right, so I see some of you guys got on. One of the things that I tried to do ahead of this was to turn on the Q&A feature, but again, it didn't work. And this time for this class, this is live, so we got the sort of live class here. You guys can say hi. We have 11 people on the web right now, and so we're just going to go ahead and get started here. Now, because we don't have the Q&A feature, again, if you have questions, the thing to do is to just go ahead and post them either on the Google Hangout community or just directly email me. And actually, you know what? Let me see if I can turn this around so that I'm at least facing this way. And I'll go ahead and answer them. So if you have your computer, the way I'm going to be teaching this is kind of like code along. So basically the idea is that at the beginning of this course, you don't need to know anything as far as programming goes. And I'm going to walk you through every step of making your own app, literally coding it as we go. And so we'll make like the front end piece, the visual piece that everybody sees, and then the database to store information in, APIs to send information back and forth between the app, and maybe you've heard people call it the cloud, that famous buzzword, and then ultimately compile the app and publish it on the App Store. So throughout these sessions, and we're going to do 1 hour each week, I'm going to go slow enough so if I start going too fast and I lose you, stop me, and we'll go slow enough such that at least most people will be able to keep up. So, all right, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so let me actually just first off make sure that I don't have. So any questions before I get started, either from the web or here? Pretty straightforward. Okay, great. So I'm again just going to have my phone up here. So if anyone on the web has questions, just go ahead and email me. So the first thing that we're going to do is, so if you saw okay, so somebody says he's not able to join. If you know anyone, for those who are on the web, if you know anyone who's not able to join, send them the YouTube link because that may work. So, how many of you guys have done Codecademy or looked into it? You started into it, Betty, I know did. So by the way, if you missed my intro course and you're interested, let me know and I'll send you the video which explains sort of the whole process and the initial. There's a website called Codecademy where you can learn the initial languages and the other sort of pieces to it, sort of the high-level overview. But what we're going to do is just go ahead and sort of start setting up our app. And the only thing you'll need to open up on your computer is if you have Notepad++ installed. Okay, so this is what a lot of code looks like. Beautiful? Yes, beautiful. But what we're going to do is if you have Notepad++, go ahead and open that up. The only difference between that and regular Notepad is that it will actually highlight your syntax. So like your text will look different from your numbers, from your variables, and it'll actually help you see if you misspelled something or stuff like that. But otherwise, if you don't have Notepad++, just go ahead and open up a Notepad. And then the thing to do is go up to File and Save As. And then just go ahead and find a place on your computer to put this. I'll just go to my desktop. And if you're in Notepad++, go to select HTML as the type. Now, if you don't have a Notepad++, if you just have regular Notepad, the thing to do is just select all files, and then when you type in the file name, add HTML at the end. So the common HTML name for the first page is just called index, but you could call it whatever you want. So I'm just going to call this index.html and save it. So I've got a couple people following along. Tony and John, are you guys there so far?
I just downloaded and installed it.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And Jonathan's also following along. Betty, are you wanting to follow along, or you're busy over there?
I will in a little bit.
All right, and again, anybody on the website. Oh, thank you. So by the way, Raj just posted the link to YouTube on the Hangouts page for anyone who needs that. So if I'm going too fast here, or if you miss a step, just stop me and send me an email. So the first thing that you're going to do, and if you started going through the classes on Code Academy, and if you haven't, don't worry if you're like, okay, well, I know this because you told me, but how would I know otherwise? The answer is to go to this website, codeacademy.com, or codeacademy.com also works, and they have free, very easy lessons online for HTML and CSS, which is what we're going to be doing today, where basically they're like, okay, here's why you need to do this, here's what you need to do, and they give you a little assignment, you write a little code, it shows up immediately, and then they're like, okay, you got it right or you got it wrong. And if you got it wrong, they tell you why you got it wrong. So the first thing we're going to do in HTML is you actually so everything, HTML, they love less than or greater than signs. So basically all of your commands go inside of these, they're called angle brackets. And the structure of it is kind of, think about containers. And you mark the start of a container with this, it's called a tag, this HTML, and then you close a container with backslash at the beginning of that tag. So basically what we're saying here is we're saying this is going to be our website. And so this is, this is good. Now we have our website, and then there's two other sections to HTML, and I always like to, it's a good practice, it helps you read your code later, if you always indent once, so have everything inside a container, one tab in from the container itself. So I hit tab, and then I put head, and then I'm going to close out my head section like that. And then below the head, guess what you have? A body.
Below the body?
Yes, well, the body's below the head. Unless you're standing on your head, then your head's below your body. So the basic purpose for the head is where you put stuff that people don't see. So, for example, one thing that goes here is the title of the page. So I'm going to just go ahead and, this is a classic computer science thing, hello world. And again, when you I'm putting in the title container, so I have this title opening tag, and it's called the title closing tag. This will show up, like you see how up here in my editor I have like the name of this file. When someone goes to your website, if you have a title defined, it will show that up in the address bar, but more importantly, Google will use that when people search for your site. So if you show up in the search results, the blue text that people click on will be whatever you define in the title. So that's really helpful. In a bit, we're going to put other things in here which don't show up on the page, but which are kind of the properties of the page.
Is there a limit to how many words you can put in the head?
No.
Did you put every possible search keyword in there?
Yes. So actually, I was just talking with someone this morning about SEO. It's called search engine optimization, and the deal is that if you put a whole, like every possible keyword, Google says, all right, then none of your keywords count. Yeah, so it's better to have fewer, actually. There's like a sweet spot. You want to have enough, but not too many.
Do you know what the number is? Or?
I mean, just from gut feel and what I've seen, it's about 10. What's that? Yeah. So you can probably Google it, right? Exactly. So, yes.
When you save it, is there a specific way to save it? I think I missed that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the question is there a special way to save the file? Are you in Notepad++? When you go to File, Save As, make sure that the type is this hypertext markup language file. So it's like down, there's all these different types in here. It's roughly alphabetical.
Okay.
So if you go down to the H section, you should see it there. So just, yeah, make sure you save it as that. And then you'll see that as a result, it is making my commands green and my just regular text, which is not HTML commands, white. So it just kind of helps me see that, okay, these are commands and these are not commands. Now, the fun thing is that HTML is the most forgiving language ever. It basically makes its best effort to guess what you wanted it to do, and it'll never crash. It'll always just be like, okay, I have no idea what you were doing here, but let me just do something and try to do what I think you want. So in the body, we can literally just put any text we want. So a classic, again, the classic computer science first program is Hello World. I'll just say, how are you doing? And now we've got our first program. So the way you run the program is very simple. You go to wherever you saved it. In this case, it's my desktop. And for most of you, it will actually be showing up as your internet icon. For me, I've set my HTML files to always open up with Notepad++, but for most of you, you'll just be able to double-click on that, and it'll open up with your browser. Otherwise, in my case, I have to say specifically, go ahead and I right-click on it, and I say open it with my browser. And there it is. And so every time now that I make a change to this file, all I have to do is refresh this website. So if I come back to my code, one of the first tags that you'll learn about is it's called an H1 tag. And H1, I'm going to just go ahead and surround the Hello World piece with that. Basically what that does is it says make whatever text is inside this H1 container a header. And by a header it means it's going to be large, it's going to be bold, and it's going to put space above and below it. So if I now save that, you always have to make sure that you save it to get it to reflect.
Is there any point in using headers in the head?
No. So again, the head section is for stuff not on the page. It's for like defining properties of the page or helping with the search results or stuff like that. So I come in here now and I hit refresh, or a shortcut to that is if you press the F5 key on your keyboard if you're using Windows. Now look, it changed the way it looked. So does this make sense so far? Everybody's following along? Okay, great. So now, so that's what HTML is. And really, to understand all the things that HTML has, the thing to do is you're going to go to, I'll pull it up again for those who missed it, thecodeacademy.com. And when you first come in, you're going to have to sign in, and then you're going to scroll down to where it says language skills. And there's going to be this HTML and CSS section. And when you click on that, you'll see, so they have over 4.5 million people enrolled in this course. They estimate it takes about 7 hours to complete the whole thing. And what you do is you go into here, and they give you a little place to program code right here. And as you code it, it immediately reflects over here. And they basically give you little instructions, do this, do the other thing, and then when you're done, you save and submit the code, and you go on to the next lesson. So I highly recommend that in this week, before the next session, if you spend 1 hour a day, by the next session you'll have done the entire HTML and CSS course. So it's pretty easy to get started on. And one of the other neat things is that this website has a video of this guy who had no former programming experience. He learned how to program websites on Codecademy, and 5 months later for him and 3 months later for somebody else, they were one of the top 50 websites as ranked by Yahoo. As far as, it's not like top 50 in usage, but top 50 as far as the content and so forth. So it just shows how easy it is to get started. So, all right, so now we have a basic HTML page. So now I'm just going to quickly introduce CSS, and Jonathan, I know you were asking about this. So CSS is basically how we style our page. So HTML is sort of the content, and then CSS is how we style it. So, for example, suppose I wanted to make this "How are you doing?" text, or how are you? Maybe I just want to make you styled, colored red. Let's just say. So first off, I'm going to put it in a container. And a span container basically is a container that doesn't go to a new line. So if I put it in, if I were to just save this and refresh the page, you'll see it didn't do anything. You know, it's just saying, okay, got a container here, but I'm just going to stay in this line, not do anything. But because now we put it in a container, we can apply some style to it and to just that piece. What we're going to do here is just say style equals color red, and let me just wait for folks to catch up with this. And the general rule is that in HTML, within the, so again, we've got this span container, right? In the first tag in the container, you can put, these are called attributes. So span has a style attribute. Some things have like a width attribute, a height attribute, a cell, like for tables, a cell padding attribute, all different attributes. And the places that you put them is right there in that between the opening angle bracket and the name of the block, and before the, you know, and inside the right angle bracket there. So now if I save that and come back here and refresh, how are you doing? And you can then apply all sorts of other CSS. So this is called inline CSS, where basically I'm just sort of manually putting this in right here. Now another way that you can do CSS is that you can define these things called classes. So for example, let's say that I have a whole paragraph of text, and I want to sort of highlight different sections. And every time I highlight a section, I want to have the same style. Let's say I want it to be red and bold and italic and this different font face, right? Maybe instead of Times New Roman, it's Calibri or Verdana or something like that. So rather than, let's just say, I've got a whole paragraph of text that I want to highlight different things in. So let's just say that you know, I wanted to highlight this piece here and this piece over here. I could, right? I could take this, and again, suppose, like I said, we've got color red, and let's just say font size 3 and font face for Dana. I could, right? I could take this style and I could copy it to every one of those spans, right? But then suppose I decide later, suppose my users say to me, hey, we really don't like that red color. We'd really like you to highlight it blue. Oh boy, so now I have to go through my code and I have to change blue in every single place, right? So there's a much better way of doing this, and it's with something called classes. So I come up here to my head, and I put these style tags. And let me actually just double check the syntax on this, because just to make sure this is correct. Okay, good. By the way, if one of the things that I mentioned in the first class is that because the languages we're using to make these apps are the same languages people have used to make websites, there are a ton of free help documentation out there. So like you saw, I was just looking up, you know, CSS tags, and one site that you'll run into a lot is this W3 Schools website. And they are basically a library of all of the different code that you use to make websites.
So, what are they, or I don't know, what's the instance of you using, just borrowing code, like they already have it coded for you and you just use it for your purposes?
No, so they don't have like code snippets to use. You can get those other places. They sort of explain, here's what these things do. Here are the different attributes of them. Here are some different options you can use to configure them. So they're more of a, like an education thing. But there are also a lot of websites that have existing programs. Oops, let me just double check. Okay, so someone just asked if I could please repeat the verbally asked questions because they can't hear. Sure, absolutely. So the question was basically, what's the purpose of W3 Schools? Does it have code, sort of existing code that you can just copy and paste and use, right?
No.
So the answer is no. For them, they're more giving you instruction on different attributes. But for example, suppose that I wanted to, and I actually did this, and we'll get into this later. Suppose I wanted to have a graph, right? I wanted to have like a little visual thing in my code that displayed a graph. Now I could spend all sorts of time writing code to make a graph. But on the other hand, I could just go ahead and say HTML graph. And oh, you know what? I'm going to say really the thing to look in is plugin snippet. And you can see here 50 plus best jQuery graph and jQuery chart plugin with examples. So I come in here, and we're going to get into that later. And here are all these different websites. And in fact, if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see here they say Chart.js open source HTML5 charts for your website. And you click on this, and they say, hey, we can create these charts for you very easily. And if you go over here to like their documentation, they tell you exactly how to put in the code to make a chart. So that's one of the other very nice things about there's a lot of existing code out there that you don't have to rewrite. So going back here to, so we were talking about classes, right? I want to make this highlight class. The way you make a class is you do a dot and then the name of your class. And then you put this little squiggly bracket and then another squiggly bracket like that. And now inside of there you put all of your CSS rules. So I say, okay, I want it to be red, I want it to be font size 3, and I want it to be font face Verdana. And again, if you're wondering like, well, how should we know to use font dash face, colon Verdana to make it change the style of font? Again, all that type of information is the intro to it is on Codecademy, and then as you want to look things up, like you say, hey, what should I use to make my font bold? You can just look up CSS bold font, and if you do that, you'll find tons of different websites out there. So I say CSS bold font, and sure enough, W3 Schools comes up, and they say, oh, use font dash weight bold, and so it's pretty easy to find what you want to do. So let me just double check. Any questions so far? Is it a good? Yeah.
The style container inside the body.
And just say class equals highlight. And then we can take that and apply that same class to the other spans. I'll just hold up a minute, Tony and John. Are you following along? Are you caught up here? Okay. And again, if anybody on the web, if I'm going too fast, just stop me.
Are you streaming?
I am. Yep. So we currently have 16 people following along on the web, and we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 in the room. for those on the web. So now if I go over to the site and refresh it, now see what happened? If I zoom in, maybe you'll see what happened.
Oh no.
That's font size 3. So I think it's 3 pixels. So I think what we want to do, we want to come in here and say, maybe we want to say 12 PT. Or maybe we want to make it bigger. Maybe we'll say 18 PT.
David, what kind of bracket are you using?
Okay, so the question is, what are these brackets? The key to use is, so on your keyboard over by the Enter key, do you see where they have the square brackets?
Yeah.
If you push Shift on that, you'll get the curly brace.
Okay.
Yep. So notice, by the way, this is a perfect example of why we want to use classes, right? We thought that we wanted font size 3 for all of those things. Turns out that was wrong. We wanted size 18 PT, 18 point. So rather than having to go through and change every single place, I changed it one place, and there we go.
So what is point scan for, or what's the significance?
So that's the font measurement that you use in Microsoft Word. So when you drop down that menu and they've got font size 8, 10, 11, 12, those are unit size point. Now I don't know the significance of what point is, but before I believe it was using pixels. So it was making each letter 3 pixels wide, which is why it was so small.
What's the default size?
I believe the default size, well, so this is 18, so I believe it's 12, which is like the default size if you open up a fresh Word document. So this is the gist of HTML and CSS. So then there's one final piece. So this, I showed you inline, I showed you this sort of style block style, but then there's yet another way that you could do CSS, which is to actually put your CSS in a separate file.
Why would you want to do that?
So yes, so
Sorry, no,
yep.
why would you want to do that?
Yeah, I can repeat the question. So the question is, why would you want to put your CSS in another file? One reason is if you're working on a team and one team is doing styling and another team is doing content, so that way you're kind of got separate files. But another reason is if you are making code for other people to use, and that's actually what we're going to get into here. Is when we start using jQuery mobile to make our website actually look and work like an app. They have some default look and feel to it, right? By default, it's this white and black color. But they have a tool whereby you can sort of specify all the colors that you want and different border sizes and stuff like that. And then you just replace the CSS file and all the styles change on your website without having to change any of your code. So that's why part of why we're going through this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take out my CSS here. Take out my style, and now I'm going to create a new file. So I go to File, New, and then we're going to do File, Save As, and we're going to save as type Cascading Style Sheets file. And again, your list of file types is alphabetical, so just going down to the C section, you should find that. And let me just hold up here to let people catch up and see if I have any questions from the web. All right. And you're welcome, Christine, for repeating the questions, I guess. So do CSS here. And you'll just want, for the sake of this, to save your CSS in the same folder that you created your HTML file in. Now, when I do a professional website, I'll just show you here the code for Scoutlet. I actually like to put my CSS code in a separate folder from my HTML code. So out here, you can't see it because it's only selecting CSS files. Let me just go ahead and say all. So out here, I've got my index.html file, and then I've got a separate folder with all my CSS, and then this is a separate folder, JS, for all of my JavaScript, and we'll get into JavaScript in another session. So just FYI, But for now, we'll just save it in the same folder to make it easy. And one good thing to just call it is just style.css.
Can you call on two different CSS files in the same HTML file, or no?
Yes. So you can include as many CSS files as you want, and essentially what that does is it takes the content. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in that CSS here, and essentially what it does when you include a CSS file in your HTML, it basically takes the contents of that and it like plops it into style tags. So it's like plop, plop, plop. It'll just take the contents of as many files as you include and put it in that HTML file, basically. Okay. So yeah, by the way, the reason this went so fast for me is because I cut and pasted from the HTML, so if you didn't do that, I'll just give you a chance to catch up and put it in there. So now we're saying, okay, so now we've got this class defined in this separate file. How do we include this file in our HTML? And where do we do that? So first off, so again, what I can do here is just, I'll do a search for this because I actually don't remember the specific syntax. I'll just look up CSS include in HTML. And CSS how to. So here they talk about it, right? 3 ways to insert CSS. So we already talked about the inline style, where we just put it right in the tag, in that style attribute. The internal style sheet, which is where we created those style blocks and just put it in there. And then the last way is this external style sheet. And here they say, oh, all you have to do is in your head put this code. So I'm going to just go ahead and copy it. You guys can take off of my screen here. And so basically we're saying, okay, put a link in a file that's a type style sheet. Its type is text and CSS, and href in HTML, href means what's the link, what's the path to the file, is in this case just the name of our file, which we called style.css.
But does it need to be in the same folder?
It needs to be in the same folder if you're just going to directly call the file. Now, if I had, so let me go out to my desktop here to show you. Oop. So out on my desktop, I have my index.html and I've got my style.css. Now, suppose I had created a new folder called CSS, and I put my style in there. Then what I'd have to do to access it, is I'd have to say CSS slash, whatever the name of my folder is, slash the name of the file. And if it was inside a folder inside the folder, then I'd put that other folder's name slash style. So basically the way you go into files is with the name of the file and a slash.
So you're saying the relative location of the CSS file to the where the HTML file is?
So right. So the question is, does the CSS file have to be relative to where the HTML file is? Now the answer to that is yes, if you're using a relative path.
Okay, so that's a relative.
So this is a relative path. Now, if there was the CSS file online, so suppose, and there actually is one I can show you, for example. So let me think if there's a good example I can show you. Well, all right, let me just do this.
Sorry, I should bother you about that later. That's boring.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, it's a good question. So, in fact, with jQuery Mobile, there are 2 ways that we can include their CSS in our code. One way is that we actually download their code and then link to it. And then the other way is that they actually have their. Oh man, I hit download. That's why it's taking so long. Cancel that. Oh, okay. Sorry. That is that's their download here. Let me go to. Oh man, now it's downloading it multiple times. Okay. Let me see here. They have a place, or at least they used to, where you can actually, let me see if I go to their page here. Oh yeah, where they have a full link to their CSS. So actually, if I click on this, you'll see this is all their CSS. It goes on for a long, 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 long time. So what you could actually do is you could actually copy and paste that link, even though it's not relative to your code, into that href thing, and it would then link. It would then include. It would pull that code off, download that code off the web, and put it into your stuff. So we'll actually get to that in a bit. But for now, not to be more confusing, we're just going to link to our style.css, which is in the same folder as our HTML. So let me go ahead and just pull that back out. Okay, right there. Now, by the way, again, as I mentioned, HTML is incredibly forgiving. So I could actually, probably, I think I can delete both of these things and just do that, and it would probably still work. So it's one of those funny things that, or kind of nice things that it will be just very much try to guess what you mean. So now, if I go to my Hello World and refresh it, it should all still look the same. And it does. Now, just to prove that we actually did something, go back into your style.css folder. File. And on Notepad++, by the way, up here you'll see they have tabs. So the way you go between index and that is by clicking on the tabs. Let's just go ahead and change the font color to blue. I mean, we could even, if you wanted to, add that font weight bold thing that we saw. And now, again, you see this is a totally separate file that we could send to somebody and say, hey, we just made this amazing highlight class that makes your stuff big and bold and blue. Do you want it? You want to use it? And then they could say, yeah, sure. So anyway, so we've now made those changes. I come over here and refresh it, and now it's bold and blue. So that's the deal. Hey, Nathan. So yeah. So basically now, these are the core things about how to make a website. And ultimately, you need to know more HTML, to make it look nice. But ultimately, all the websites you see are made with this stuff. And just to prove it, like for example, if I go to, let me just go to Facebook, for example, right? If I go to facebook.com, and you're like, wow, but you mean Facebook? I mean, that's like super complicated and stuff. They're using all the same stuff. So if I go ahead and I right-click, you can say View Page Source, and they will show you the HTML for any website. So here, sure enough, it's HTML, head. They have this meta information, and you can see obviously they have a whole ton of stuff. If I look for CSS, you can see here they're linking to CSS files, and then down below, if I search for body, oops, actually it was above. They have the body tag and then all that. So any website, and actually that was one of the ways I got started. Was in high school they had this yearbook website, and kind of like I was never on MySpace, but it worked similar to the thing there where you had fields you could pre-fill, and people figured out you could put HTML in the fields, and then you could change the backgrounds of your pages and all stuff like that. So I would just go around to other people's pages, and when I saw something I liked, I'd view the source, copy the code, and bring it over to my page. And so actually you can do that. Sometimes that's a difficult way of doing things because you'll be like, wait, you won't know all of the code and the things they had to include to make it work, but it is one method and something that one of the hack ways that I got involved with it. So I see I got a notification here. Any questions at this point? Okay, let me just see. Okay, so one question from the web so Raj asked, I named the CSS file as style.css. Does that have anything to do with the fact that the block is called style? No. You could call that file whatever you want. You could call it purple cow. and and you know, just as then all you'd have to do is that you'd have to make sure that when you linked it here, you know, brought in purplecow.css.
Add symbols or punctuation.
So the question was, can you add symbols or punctuation to the file? There are some rules. I don't know all of the rules for that. And then the other question is, can we define multiple classes in one CSS file or call them separately? And the answer is definitely yes. So in my style here, I could also include my fancy class, and I'll say font style italic, for example. And let's just make the color pink. And then I could come over here and then apply the fancy class to this. And by the way, don't feel like you need to keep up with this. I'm just trying to just quickly show this. And now you can see a terrible pink color. It's like very hard to read and italic. So you can have as many classes as you want in there. Now, one other thing that you'll find out in when you do when you go through the CSS things is that besides defining classes, you can actually change the style of regular HTML elements. So, for example, if we wanted to change that h1 tag, I can say h1 with no period in front of it, and let me just say, I don't know if background color works for that. I'm going to just say margin bottom is 50 pixels. So let's say I want a lot of space below it. Now, because I didn't put a dot behind it, it actually is modifying the style of the default HTML h1 element. So now when I go back to my website and refresh, you see the text bump down a little.
That's just because you reference that style sheet in your code?
Correct. Yep. So because I basically overrode their default style. Now the way that where that comes in really handy, and this is something that jQuery mobile does, is people have basically use that to make it very easy for you to write HTML code, which they then turn into fancy stuff like a drop-down menu. So for example, there are plugins out there that'll say, hey, all you have to do is, and I'm just going to quickly show this here. This is how you make an unordered list in HTML. So, hi, everybody. This is the code that you use, so you make a list, and then you have these list items, and by default, it creates a bullet list like that. But some people get very clever, and they say, hey, you can just do that, and then add a class here, and then import our CSS, and we'll turn that list into a fancy drop-down menu. So that's one of the benefits to being able to override HTML styling with CSS. All right, let me just double-check if there are any more questions from the web, and then I'm going to move on to the next piece, which is now, okay, great, we know how to, we're starting to get a feel for how we make a website. Now how do we make this website look and feel and work like an app? So the way we do that is, again, like I mentioned in the intro session, with this site called jQuery Mobile. Now, what jQuery Mobile is, for those who missed the intro, just very quickly, it basically has some pre-designed mobile components, mobile-friendly components, like if I go here to, well, let me just do the date picker just because it's a really obvious one. You know that on a phone, the worst thing in the world is typing. And the other thing that's tricky is very small things you get fat finger syndrome trying to click on. So, for example, they make text boxes bold and chunky. Oh, and when you tap on it, it pops down this nice touch-friendly menu, and when you tap on a date, it fills in the text for the date. So these are the types of things that they do, and if you click View Source, wow, that's all the code I needed to do that. Because they take that, and then they add in all this other stuff to make it work. So the way that we get this included in our code is, so on your own computers, if you're following along, go to jQuerymobile.com, And when you get there, you're going to go to the download section. And rather than downloading it, since I know you all have internet or you wouldn't be hearing me, although, do you guys have internet? John, you're both connected? Okay. And Betty, I assume, is connected. Okay. They provide this beautiful little copy and paste snippet to get all of their code into your stuff. Now you'll notice that there's a CSS file like we talked about, but then there's also these JavaScript files. And we'll get into JavaScript after this. But the best way of thinking about JavaScript is that basically JavaScript is the code that you use to make your website work. So for example, like you saw that calendar, how when I clicked on the next button it changed the month. When I clicked on a date it put the text in there. That's all JavaScript doing that. So anyway, so they have JavaScript that does that. All we need to know for now is that we copy and paste all of that into the head of our HTML. So I'll just give a minute to let everybody do that. Now, now that we have this in here, and I see we're actually running out of time, so we're going to pick this up next session. But basically now we can use any of their commands. Like on the demo site, like you saw view source, we can now do any of those commands. So let's just go ahead and actually put in that fancy calendar widget we saw. Now, one thing though first. The way that they have this introduction section here, and you can read through all of this. But the most important thing to know is that they have a few extra things that you have to add to make this work nicely on a phone. The first thing is that, so first off, you see these things here are the things we already copied. The one other thing we have to put in is this meta tag, and basically what this does is, so the resolution on my phone is the same resolution as on a computer. They've gotten so high resolution. However, I don't want them to squish that website into my phone. You know, so the same width on the computer, I don't want them to squish that onto the width of my phone because it's like super, super small. So basically what this meta tag does is it's, hey, don't try to squish everything into the resolution. Look at the actual physical width of the device and kind of base how you display stuff off of that. So I'm just going to paste this in here below the title. So I'll just give everybody a moment to type that in. And while you're typing that in, one other thing that I'm going to explain is that, so in HTML, you saw how we had this page with all this text in it. If we wanted to, let's just say, have a contact us page, the way you would normally do that in HTML is I would create another HTML file called contact.html, let's just say, and I would then have a link on this page that would open up that other page. So it would leave this page and it would go to that other page. But what jQuery Mobile did was they said, well, every time that you open up another page, you have to download stuff from the internet, and that's slow. So what if you just had all of your pages in one file? So you have a bit of a download at first, but now every time you click on a page, it'll just immediately load up. So the way that we do that is with this thing called div data role equals page. And they also, inside that page, they then have they have a header section, a main section, and a footer section. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this code. Actually, by the way, if you guys want, I'm going to just paste this in the chat here. So I just shared the link to this page in case you guys want to copy this code. For those in the room, if you just want to go to that URL. This code, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our body. And just to make things clean, just first go ahead and delete everything inside of your body tags. So now your code should just look like this. And then you can go ahead and paste that code, and you can see it looks like the indentation looks funny, and so you can just go ahead and indent those things. Again, the sort of the style is that everything is indented one tab from its outside container. So HTML, you can see, is all the way to the left. So head and is one inside it. Everything inside it is another one inside. And as a result, it just helps me see that, okay, this page is inside my body. The header's inside the page. It just kind of helps you keep track of where everything is. So I'll just give a minute. Tony, you got that? And Betty? Sure. So it's demos.jQueryMobile.com/1.4.3/pages. And Jonathan, you're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, anybody on the web, if I lost you, you want me to go back, just go ahead and email me. Hopefully next time I'm going to get this Q&A thing figured out. All right. So now you can actually just go ahead and so you can see they have these dot dot dots. Instead of dot dot dot, just go ahead and put whatever you want in the header. So I'll just put my first app. And if you didn't guess already, I like Hello World. And then in the footer, maybe you put like copyright 2014 or whatever. Oops. Now you can see now notice how I was looking up here and I'm like, wait a minute, why is this blue? And it's because I actually overwrote some of my HTML code. So that's an example of how their highlighting helps you detect errors that you make. So now your stuff should look like this. And by the way, notice that we're using a class here. So what they do is they have a whole bunch of styling inside this UI content class that will position this relative to the header and the footer and make it display properly. So now if we go back here and we refresh it, we have this this little header, content, and a footer. And obviously it's pretty ugly at this point, but we will work on that next time. So so this now is the basic structure of a jQuery mobile app. And starting next week, I'll show how you actually start making it look nicer, and we'll start working on our first app, which will be a tracking app that'll basically let you record stuff and then plot it on a graph. So any last questions? I'm just going to double check the web one more time. And if anyone runs into questions like during the week or stuff, there's a Facebook event page and also the Google Plus page where you can ask stuff, and any of the other people attending or myself can answer your questions. So thank you everybody online. I'll send out the recording for anybody who missed it or came in halfway, and I'll see you all next Wednesday.